Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm calling this evening from Deerfield, Massachusetts, which is Western Massachusetts. Don't expect many people to have heard of this small village. But here I am a teacher. I teach at a high school, English literature, and dabble in a little bit of philosophy and religion as well. Um, and I am also involved in an organization called Envoys, which is a global education community. We work with schools around the world to provide and to carry out educational travel programs, and that's what I'm doing currently.
Sounds like a lot. And, I'm so excited to hear more about your work at this school as a teacher. Also, the work that you do at Envoys, because it does already sound like right off the bat that you are like balancing the local and global kind of community side of things. And I think I'm just excited to hear more about what you have to say about global citizenship. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining us on the podcast, and also happy spring. We were just talking about this before, but I feel like what better way to kick off spring than have a very reflective and engaging conversation about education, life, I don't know, just deep thoughts and purpose. Let's do that.
Couldn't agree more. Yes, let's let our minds bloom a little bit.
I love that, the imagery. So yeah, so without further ado, I'd love to hear you share your story, and maybe speak to what led you into this work of being an educator, of working for this organization, this global education community. I love the framing of that. But like, how does one find that in their path? And so, if you can take us through some of the milestones that really were formative for you, I think that would be really fascinating.
Of course. Yeah, with pleasure. So maybe I start at the very beginning. I come from a family of educators. I I actually grew up on a school campus, similar to what I'm doing right now, where I live with the students that I teach, quite literally. They're down the hall. Um, and I grew up uh, on a school where the boundaries between my life as a young person, and what school was, were very fuzzy. Yeah, so my brother and I would leave the house and we would play on the school tennis courts or in the senior lounge. Education and my personal life were always very intertwined, because of that background, and so being in schools and being around schools always felt very familiar, familial even. Um, and so I think that created a real um, comfort in the classroom and in academic sort of environments, generally in schools. And uh, that lasted for, some time. Um, because of that, I think that intimacy, I never thought I would be in education. Actually, I resented my parents really for being in the line of work, educators, because I basically saw them as adults who told children what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. And I couldn't understand why an adult would want to spend their life telling young people what not to do. Um, so it took a while for me to grow an appreciation for the work that teachers do, that educators do. But I think I learned that through my own experience as a student, really loving studying, learning to love what I studied, which was philosophy, religion, literature, sort of what I'm teaching now. Learning to love learning as a student. And, I thought about as I was moving into the world, how can I how can I continue doing this? Yes, I know I likely couldn't afford being a student for my whole life, so it felt important or somewhat maybe obvious to try the teaching side, and so that's what I did for the next 10 years of my life. I taught. Um, After graduating, I taught for 10 years in very different places, in public schools, in private schools, in the U.S., abroad, um, in as sort of a diverse set of environments that I could design for myself to understand, I think, where I was most at home or most motivated. Where what schools, um, what what classrooms did I feel most connected to? And so it was sort of a time of really rich experimentation, um, as a teacher, but also as an individual, sort of where I felt belonging and connectedness in terms of this work. Yeah. And so, that was from 2011 to basically right before the pandemic, where I was teaching. And it was teaching in international contexts where I sort of first met the idea of global citizenship, but more than that, started to think about different systems of education, how they work. Yes, why a system in South Africa did certain things this way, and a system in the U.S. did it that way, and how we might be able to um, share ideas across borders. Yes, across contexts. I never knew there was a whole world of comparative education where we're thinking about um, how we can use solutions from contexts and apply those to challenges in other parts of the world. This was never something I knew was sort of formally studied, but through my own experience teaching in different places, I began to think about this. Yes, um, how my own experience as a student compares to the experience I was seeing Colombian students have or South African students have, and what different systems, what different countries were doing about education, how seriously they were taking it, the mission, quality, access to education, all of that, um, and and was fortunate enough to find a course of study that was that was looking at international education policy, which is sort of our crossroads. Scott and another one of our mutual friends, Ankit, as well, sort of studying at the Harvard Ed School. And I studied in 2017 for a year that, international education. Um, what what secretaries or ministries of education do to affect change, how that works. Yes, how someone up here can make a decision that affects change in classrooms. There's sort of understanding the systems level there, and which was incredibly fascinating for me and really important, I think, to see how different levels operate. Hopefully in sync, but sometimes not so much. Um, but that's the course of study. Sort of was really formative, formative in just helping me see the larger picture, right? And building a curiosity and appreciation for the real diversity of how we educate students, for what that looks like in different parts of the world. Um, and just ask important questions. Should we all aspire to the same form of education? Does quality mean the same thing in different places? Just starting to ask these questions, and you know, I hope this is coherent so far. But from there, I dabbled in more leadership work, in academic designing curriculum for networks of school in English language learning, um, and and also finding an organization which I mentioned here, Envoys, which is it's a community that brings students out into the world. Yes, that designs and leads both local and international programs. Yes, they create classrooms um, anywhere in the world, and um, that has been also an important uh, sort of manifestation of this, or intersection rather, of education and um, sort of cultural awareness that has been really important. As you can see, Scott, I've probably done too much in this time. I've really sought out experience. I haven't lasted too long in one thing, because that hunger to try something different has been very strong within me. But it's also helped me to see what I like and what I don't like. Um, and I'll close this response just by saying, I think what I've learned over that exploration, or that experimentation, is that although teaching is so hard and so demanding, there is no place outside the classroom where I feel as connected, or as motivated as when I am in contact with students. So it took a while um, to sort of end up where where I started, but it's kind of poetic, and I'm happy that I'm in the classroom now.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ben. And of course it was poetic, right? This is
Right.
you we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Everything you said was just poetry. And I really, yeah, I really see so many connections between the work that you had done in your past, the work that you're currently doing, but then this ties back to your parents as well in such a fascinating way, right? Because I think that hunger, that drive to like maybe move to like another job or try out a new role, it stems from this strong desire to like kind of learn what else is out there, to expand, right, that perspective of what is possible and what kind of impact that you want to make in the world. But I kind of wanted to rewind the clock a little bit more, because you spoke about your parents. I mean, it had, of course you have like such deep appreciation for their profession, and of course how they brought both you and your brother up. It was just
Yes,
you? Okay.
exactly.
But you also kind of said, oh, well, but initially you kind of resented them, and it took a while for you to get to a point where you were able to understand the task of a teacher. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about your parents as kind of the role model figures for you, or maybe even speak a little bit to like what brought them into education. Do you think it was similar to kind of your upbringing? Did they grow up on it, like in an academic environment as well? What kind of led them to that path?
Yeah. So yes, you anticipated. Well, it's a mix of both, really. On my father's side, it goes back generations, working in schools, different kinds of schools, but that that upbringing or that background has some strong roots, and so obviously that has an impact. But I guess what I've seen and what I understand now is, and what I've come to appreciate now, is a real alignment in values and what is important and worth committing to in the time that we have. There's so many options of how we spend our time, and one of the things I wrestle with right now as a teacher is, how do I open students' eyes to, in a time where it seems like nobody is studying the humanities anymore. Very few students are incentivized to major in something like English literature, or, God forbid, comparative religion, religious studies. I mean, how do I sort of create an appreciation for that? That's a real challenge. But in any case, I think where I am now, and what I when I reflect, what I think about is, beneath the act of teaching, I think what connection there is between sort of generations is what it means to dedicate one's time to learning, yes, or to somebody else, to sharing a passion of reading or writing with a young person, yes, in the hope that serves them in some way, in their life. I think it's about sharing a deep passion for something with a young person who is exploring their own interests, who's finding their own voice. That um, other oriented action, I think, is what I've really come to value in the choices of my parents, and that have rubbed off on me. Scott, sometimes I wonder, was any of this, did I have free will in any of this? Was this just designed from the beginning? That's a larger discussion, but I am, I think, conscious of the fact that I am grateful that the values that I hold genuinely now are certainly influenced by my parents, but also feel true, feel right for me. Don't feel artificial, don't feel forced. I do want to dedicate my time to young people, and to reading with them and writing with them. And I didn't always see that value. Um, I think I was probably more selfish when I was younger, you know, as most youth are, in a natural way. But that became less satisfying, you know, over the course of time. Yeah.
Wow. No, thank you, Ben. I think it's very evident that your parents, as educators, were very passionate individuals themselves, and that there's this thing about passion where it just is so contagious, right? And you're wondering, what is that? What is motivating me to want to like kind of lean in closer and understand what they're saying, right? To
Yeah.
grapple with the questions that they're putting out there, and for what reason does it like light them up? And that kind of electricity, right? It just kind of jumps around the place, and sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it, right? But I think what you're telling me about your the environment that you grew up in, the fact that I think, as you kind of phrased it, the boundaries of your young life and then that of like the school life were just kind of intersecting, and it
Yeah.
was blurred and kind of all over the place. Um, it sounds very dynamic, and made it so that what you were doing, like you didn't realize that that was a learning process that you were kind of absorbing almost as if, like osmosis, right? Just kind of going through your pores. And that it took many, many years for you to unpack that or like
Yeah.
disentangle what that was, so that you could see it more clearly as this kind of through line, right? Of for what purpose am I studying English literature? For what purpose do I want to connect with my spiritual side? Why would that matter? And then what moves you?
Yeah.
And there's something about, again, that environment that we're in where it serves a purpose initially, but then we can outgrow it, or we can have something that pulls us in a different direction, and maybe a direction so far like South Africa, where you're just suddenly in a very different environment, and kind of not like starting from scratch, but kind of just starting anew with like the perspective of like what can I untangle here in terms of like my own perception of this reality. Um, so I think that it's no there's no coincidence that your path as an educator is very much kind of tied with your parents and that
Mhm.
academic environment, but then also like this recreation of that academic environment, or that process of learning is, I think, very fascinating. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of like, Paulo Freire, the
Uh-huh.
Brazilian like philosopher and educator. He talked a lot about what it means to read the world. And then
Mhm.
he actually had his own kind of classrooms just on the streets of Brazil. And so I find that, those are kind of like examples from outside of a US context that, people should be aware of, right? Because that that worked, right? For that particular context. And so you've been accruing all these experiences, right, from one country, one cultural context to the next, and I really appreciate this larger takeaway that you shared at the end about the importance of teaching for you, and why it really connects you to like a deeper purpose, and like how that's connected with other young people and just humanity. But yeah, maybe could you speak to some of those experiences? Maybe like when you first went abroad,
Mhm.
was there like a pivotal moment where like it was a very clear shift away from one environment to a new environment? Because it sounds
Yeah.
like, yeah, that
Yeah.
initial home base was very secure,
Yeah.
but prepared you well, but then maybe not exactly for the next big launch.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was becoming clear to me at a certain moment in time that if I didn't create some separation from that accrual of familiarity, yes, my friends and the context and the network, that was going to be uh, fixed in some way, that it was going to be harder and harder to break free of that. Or maybe I would become less and less interested in breaking free. Maybe I would just build and build, career, family, to the point where it became impossible to free myself for a period of time from that. And so, it was a pretty radical break. None of my friends had done something like this. In fact, they were sort of leading those more, um, traditional paths. And I, I just, I was lucky enough to have a connection of a small school in Cape Town, South Africa, um, that was willing to uh, to assign me some classes, things I never taught before. Spanish and a little bit of history and astronomy. Things that I had to invent or learn myself and then teach. But it didn't matter. I was most curious about um, the the experience, the growth, the development that would happen by removing myself from the familiar and placing myself in an entirely new context. This is not a radical decision. I know people of this state, everywhere do this through different ways. It certainly felt radical for me. You know, but I think the desire, what propelled me there, is not unique. I think that real acknowledgement that that there's so much growing and learning to do beyond what we've done here. I think that's shared in many people. And um, I would say one of the things I learned, because I moved alone. I didn't go with anyone. There was no one. There was no buddy system there. It was me making this decision on my own, not implicating anybody else. And I think what stands out about that initial sort of moving to South Africa. I moved to South Africa in 2013, and I just learned to do everything by myself. Things that are uncomfortable to do. Eat at restaurants by yourself, go to movie theaters by yourself. Just go. I was learning to be comfortable and secure with my own company. Yes, not entirely. There's still a lot of work. Still a lot of work to do there, but um, that's I think what stands out is how much I had to be present with my own self, my own thoughts, um, and what I was going to do with that. How I was going to coexist with those thoughts. And find synergy. Yes, learn to work together. um, and that was very new because previously everything I did was connected to someone. There was the networks, there was the friends, there was the people I knew and had grown up with, and um, you know, I stayed very close to that. And it was the first time that I had nobody to call, nobody to meet up with, um, or that knew me. I had to introduce myself to everybody. Nobody knew me. That whole process of introducing yourself anew to people is really sort of terrifying, but also such an incredible opportunity to to maybe not necessarily reinvent, but um, think about that answer again. Who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here? Who do I want to be? Those questions. Not all of those questions you say in the introduction, but those were questions that I was thinking about in those moments. Yeah.
And would you call that process not reinvention, like you said, but refinement? Or like, what is that process like? Because I mean, each day, right, compounding, like, sometimes days feel similar. You're teaching a class, maybe you're going to your favorite shop, maybe,
Right.
you're starting to form new circles. But were there ever any like breaks in that kind of more smoother reality that you were navigating? Because I feel like it's just natural. Like there's that attraction for um, the novelty, right? I'm in a new environment. I have to adapt. I have to figure things out.
Right.
But then, like most of nature, it seeks homeostasis, a balance. And so, what is that? What was that experience like for you? Did you have that multiple times within one location, or was there a larger break of like reaching a sense of like, it's kind of solidifying, and then that's actually the moment when you went from like South Africa to Colombia, right? And moved on to the next thing. Like, was that enough justification to make that transition?
Yeah. I guess refinement is a word for this process. It feels too intentional, because I actually don't think any of this was designed. It was simply happening. I had no, it was hard for me to say, this is what I want out of this. I wanted to go and see what happened. I had no anticipation. So it's not as if I was intentionally refining myself. It was as if I was, um, like unpacking myself or um, unlayering myself, sort of seeing what remained after this. And I mean, to be honest, I don't think there was a moment of like coherence and, now I can do this anywhere. I will always be uncomfortable with this process. And that is partly why I continue to do it. Why I decided to do it again for 4 more years in Colombia. Uh, there has been in my own path, um, on one hand, an acknowledgement of um, the unfamiliar and the untested and the unknown is really scary, and let's go do that because that makes it all worth it. That's you know that's why I should do it. Um, and it's partly why I don't last very long in one one job is because I want that process, as difficult as it is to learn something new and to break from a community and join a new community and have to start afresh. I think deep down, as much as I sort of resent myself from doing it so often, there's so much that I'm gaining, I'm learning from. I think there's a real trade off there in not um, sort of forming and solidifying in one community and being able um, to know in depth and spend time, sort of real time in one place and in connectedness in one community. That's not something that I've established yet. I think in my life, I hope in my life that that happens, but as of right now, I've prioritized the change over the stasis, the homeostasis, just because that's for me where the growth has been. That's where the development has been. But I do think, and I do anticipate as I get older, I have a family now, that those priorities shift. The community becomes the rootedness. The scale of time changes. I'm not as hungry for the new experience. Rather, I'm building on the experiences I've had to contribute to this place. Now this community now.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow. So much of what you're sharing resonates with me because I felt the same, growing up in, you know, Southern California, like just below like Los Angeles area. It just felt like such a bubble. And I think my thought process after graduating was I just want to be anywhere but my hometown. and they say that going abroad, right? It's not many people do it. I think because of that risk factor, right? The unknown, the what happens if I get hurt? What if I don't meet anyone? Right? What if I find no purpose there? Lost investment, kind of waste of time thing. Um, but it's actually such a great education for exactly all those reasons that I just said, because it forces you to do something that most people kind of run away from, which is change.
yeah,
And in the learning process, isn't that what we're doing, right? We are changing,
yes,
sometimes in more radical ways than others, but nonetheless, it is a process that people can attribute words like reinvention or refinement, um, renewal. I don't know,
yeah,
but just I think how we approach that process of change is more suited to maybe lifestyle, maybe in terms of what we experienced when we were younger, or it's just kind of being attuned to something deeper, maybe even entering into the spiritual realm of like what's compelling you forward, right?
yeah,
Kind of beyond even just words. And so yeah, I feel like your experiences mirror a lot of kind of even why I decided to leave California and live in South America for like 7 years, right?
yeah,
It was just it kind of completely baffled a lot of people. And I don't know if you feel this way, but even the word like settled or like rooted,
yeah.
it was almost like triggering for me. I'm like, I don't want that. I'm okay. No, thank you. What you're
Yeah,
telling me is that you're trying to understand that, right? You have a family, right? You're set up at a boarding school,
yeah,
a pretty good situation, and yet you know you're grappling with what does it mean to have that real time pass and get to know a community and you know contribute in a way that maybe I don't know. You were contributing in all the other ways, right? But whether you can measure it or not, but contribute in a different way, right? Being
yeah.
fixed. So I don't think you're static in
Right.
that sense, but it's different. So could you
Yes.
unpack what do you mean by being
Yeah.
settled in one place a little
Yeah.
bit more?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I think what has changed, or what might be shifting in my own head is a certain patience, yes, or what I'm trying to develop, as a real, you know, sometimes I think about how impatient, um, I am, and how impatient I see my students are for results, yes, or for, um, to be entertained, to be, sort of engaged, connected, to go where they're trying to go. Sort of, it is, I feel like, in our, sort of reality now, where we expect things to happen really quickly, and we want them to happen really quickly, uh, and and I'm trying to let go of that. What I'm trying to shift that, or break that down a little bit, um, and understand that I think I've found value in what can come in change, and I'm not sure I found value. I've not uncovered yet the benefit or the result or the learning that can come um, with stillness, or with, um, sort of rootedness. Yes. So that's now the mission. Yes. I think the part of myself that craves that change and new experience will be there. But I think I also have to allow that part of myself um, that is also interested in what results from that real sort of patient, stillness in a place and connectedness in a community. I have to sort of give that some spotlight now. The other side has had a lot of it, and so I need to give that some air to breathe in and see what that feels like and what that looks like. Um, I think this would only be achievable, Scott, I think, in a profession like teaching, because every day is different. You're reading different books. What the student's energy gives you every day is different. Yes, I'm rooted in this community. Yeah. Just naturally by the cycle of how years work. Yes, I have one group this year, I have another group next year, and then they're off into the world. And so perhaps there is, maybe I'm finding a good blend between where I'm able to be rooted and the sort of the context or the circumstance that does add that vitality and dynamism, to the situation. I don't know. I could get really scared and need to flee and leave. That's happened before. But I think there's also just, a gut check at this point that it's no longer about me. You know, that has been the big shift. Yes, I brought a person into this world. Now it's about how my decisions also impact, you know, him, and so the priorities change. The who I'm thinking about changes, and so that I can't deny that that's also been a big shift in this idea of nesting. You know, it's the mother bird. You know, that that still feels important right now. Is building that solid base that we can grow from. Um, individually, but also as a family. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. I really feel like, we're getting into some vulnerable territory here. And, and clearly, right, this is very much on your mind. And it, yeah, it probably brings up a lot of different emotions because even that impulse to want to flee, as you said, um, reflects, a kind of past, I don't know, maybe mindset,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe reflex even. It's maybe even more, kind of primordial, right? Of just, this is what I must do, right? And then when you said that, I helped bring, new life into this world, and it's not about me, right? It's about we,
Yeah.
right? In the kind of immediate family sense. Um, that anchors you like nothing else. Says the guy that
Ugh.
doesn't have any children yet, but I have enough friends to tell me that um, that shift into fatherhood is quite dramatic.
Uh,
Um, but it's also, going to have its fair share of wonderful discoveries and journeys that, I'm sure you can speak lots and lots of.
yeah.
But I think, you know, the part about you saying like you always felt very impatient. Oh my gosh, yeah, all young people, myself included. I mean, it's so real,
Yeah.
and it makes I think actually sometimes our impatience can get the better of us and kind of cloud really what are we aiming towards in the first place? Like what are we driving towards? This it's not
Yeah.
enough just to have the intellect or the passion or the ideas. You need to have that kind of solid foundation from values and the direction of this is where I'm going. Yeah, you can kind of deviate and kind of do a little zigzag, but you have to be making advances in that direction.
Mhm.
And part of me actually wants to ask because I think you already articulated a little bit about that direction for yourself. Um, Speaking about how teaching is such a rewarding profession and career, but how it goes deeper than that, and it,
Mm.
I would say probably makes you an even better version of yourself, right? In relation to all that is around you, not just your students, but everything. Um, so supporting the development of like future generations to be more self-realized and optimistic about a better world probably is components of it, but could you maybe like articulate it a little bit more
Yeah.
in within the context of global citizenship, maybe of
Yeah.
like what are you really seeking to make a greater impact in?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love this is a beautiful question to consider. I think, especially in relation to the concept of global citizenship, I think, and this is so accessible through literature because when we read, you know, anything really, anything, but particularly fiction or poetry or things like this, um, we have access to a reality, to an emotional reality, a physical reality of someone other than ourselves, and through that we can find connection. Yes, we can find um, a relationship, um, a bond, a tie that helps us understand that we, although we only have access to this little one consciousness, and unfortunately that will be the same through the rest of our days, there are ways in which we can reveal the interconnectedness of our experience, of our world, you know, that every individual shares so much, not only our home, but as we've been talking about, these similar experiences, these similar desires, pains, fears, vulnerabilities. Um, and I think ultimately that's what I want my students to appreciate is that connectedness, that we share, yeah, ultimately that we share so much. I keep thinking my son is making me watch Lion King on loop, and there are two competing there are two competing images here. There's the Mufasa image, there's the circle of life, there's the interconnectedness, there's the Timon and Pumbaa image or concept where Hakuna Matata, don't worry about it, nothing matters. Yes, just find pleasure, right? Find your happy place, and I think I'm going for the former. Yes, it's not that because that's the worldview I share. That we are connected. That um, there is relationships, even if we can't see it between us and our neighbors and people around the world. That creates responsibility. That creates co-ownership, um, collective, um, a collective imperative to take care. Take care of each other and. I hope we have some Lion King fans in the audience, but
Yeah, man.
but that I think that is what I'm trying to do, and I'm lucky to do that through incredible thinkers and writers and authors, and it's through text, it's through reading that I'm able to achieve this. These are not my ideas. These are the ideas of others. These are the realities that others have shared with us. And through their work, we're able to do this. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, no, I think it's going great already. Give yourself more credit then. And I think, that what you're describing, right? This this appreciating the interconnectedness, like you said, but having access to such ancient wisdom, right, from great thinkers of long ago, um, but kind of processing that in our present reality, right? A reality that was different from what maybe they experienced, right? Different from the context. It I think it's just very powerful and very creative. Maybe that's another thing too that
Yeah.
came from what you were talking about. We don't give the humanities enough credit for the important component that comes from engaging in that kind of reflection, that kind of work to tap, the kind of shared realities that we have. And then from there, action that is imbued with this creative spirit of like, potential.
Yes.
What will usher
Right.
forth from this?
Yeah.
So, that all sounds very, very compelling and very important in terms of what is a larger kind of life purpose that you're setting yourself up for. And yeah, just beautifully said. So,
Thank you.
so thank you for sharing that. And then also thank you for, like the Lion King visual helps a
Yeah.
lot.
No, I hope we're not getting too too out there for
No,
people,
no.
but
And,
it's on my mind.
and I wanted to ask a really short, I mean, maybe if you could just kind of respond briefly to this, but
Yeah.
in the spirit of like the circle of life and like you're a father, and so you're understanding what your father probably went through,
Yeah.
sleepless nights,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
no free time probably. The fact that you're able to have this time for a podcast uninterrupted is already a miracle, and I'm deeply appreciative of your
Thank my partner. Yeah.
and your partner as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe like what would you say you're like so coming back and then your parents have seen this arc of
Yeah,
yours. Um, what do they kind of have to say about, where you find yourself right now? I mean, because I'm sure they probably had opinions of their own when they saw you leave for South Africa.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure they
right.
did. Yeah,
and
yeah.
probably not fully understanding why. I mean, you didn't understand fully why either, and yet it happened. But now in this new phase of your life, have you had conversations with them recently about what this signifies in terms of the collectiveness of more settled
Mhm.
life?
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed as a new parent is how incredibly difficult it is not to intervene when you see your child doing something wrong or doing something inefficiently or making mistake after mistake after mistake. Just seeing my son try to put a cap onto the Play-Doh container today. He kept doing it wrong, kept doing it wrong. And I just wanted to show him how to do it, just do it for him. It's such a powerful urge. And I need to give my parents all the credit in the world for resisting that urge as best they can throughout my development. They did it to a point of infuriation on my part. Just tell me what I should do. What should I do after I graduate? How should I do this? What should I care about? What should I study? You know, um, they refused to give me that, and only now do I see the virtue of that. That I had to learn for myself. Yes, I had to end up here full circle. And that has been my journey. That has been no influence. Well, not no influence, but that has not been their design. Yes, they have not um, dictated that. They've simply watched it happen, and probably smiled, and sort of as we will when we watch, as I will when I watch my young son, make mistakes, but get it, eventually get it. That's just where again, sort of the patience comes in for us to find that when our circle is completed, when we feel complete, it requires a lot of stumbling and fumbling, and frustration, both as the individual doing it, but also as the looker on, someone you care about making those mistakes. When are they going to get it right?
And they're
But
learning.
here I am. Here I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So that learning process from when you were very young and your parents were allowing you to make those mistakes, to guide you right in the general direction,
Yeah.
and then seeing how it plays out when now you're the parent, and really thinking about, yeah, just like how full circle it all is, and that, this, I don't know, in some ways, right, you might be thinking this is the first time, this is the first time, right, as a new parent, but there's something, primordial to like the rhythms of life, and that, like, I mean, our ancestors have been doing this, right, and what the process of child rearing is, what the process of learning is, the purpose of it all. Big questions, with few answers, but a lot to experience and enjoy. I think is probably the best we can, do to sum it up at this stage. But I wanted to ask another question,
Sure.
just because we are getting close to the end of our time, and it's been such a lovely conversation, Ben. I really appreciate you sharing, so much of kind of where you're at.
Of
Almost
course.
like processing in real time, just being like, this is it. This is I'm grappling, but it's great. And so I always ask my guests, to recommend something for the listeners. It could be anything: a book, a movie, podcast, you name it. So, what would you like to recommend for all of us?
So when thinking about this question, I immediately thought about a role model, someone that I have looked up to and learned from in my own journey, my own sort of path, and how I've merged, you know, um, my interests with with realities larger than myself, And so what came to mind are two things, both focused on the life and work of Paul Farmer. And if you don't know Paul Farmer, he is a late um, doctor, sort of global medicine evangelical, not in the religious sense, in sort of in what he brought to the world in terms of access to medication, dignity through medicine, and an incredible, an incredible person, and has left an incredible legacy. So there's one biography called Mountains Beyond Mountains, about his life, about how he actually grew up in he was born in Western Massachusetts, not far from where I stand today, um, and his work and life, and it's an incredible story to read. And there's also, for someone who also likes film, there's a documentary called Bending the Arc that I actually saw when I was a student in Cambridge, that left a huge impression on me. So if there's, at this point, I think choices of people, and that's part of the reason of this podcast, I feel too, is understanding how people are making choices that they do, why and what's behind them, and how valuable that is. Thank you, Scott, for bringing this to us. But this is another figure that I think would benefit folks interested in this work, in these concepts. His life is one that needs more attention today, especially today. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing about that particular individual. I'm very eager to learn more about Paul Farmer, and I love that name for the biography, Mountains Beyond Mountains. I mean, that's life. You climb a
Yeah.
mountain only to see there's an even bigger mountain in front of
That's
you,
right.
and you're just like, oh, I guess I gotta keep going. You know, what other choice do I have?
That's right.
So just wonderful, and thank you so much, Ben. This has been such a pleasure, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate the level of sincerity and like authenticity that you brought to some real reflections that you're going through,
Mm.
but for you to like take them on like these difficult questions with yeah, with this sense of optimism that like this is like what I signed up for, and I'm going to enjoy this, and we're going to make sense of it, and it's very encouraging for me as well, right? Looking ahead at like, oh, where am I going to be at in the next 5 or 10 years, right? And I'll probably be asking the same questions as you,
Hey,
but
don't
that's
stop.
okay. It's
Yeah.
the circle of life.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
I wanted to give the last word to you. Any final thoughts or send off as we wrap up this conversation?
You know, um, I guess I would encourage anyone listening to continue right now, interested in global citizenship, to just continue to read about the world. I feel like right now, it can be tough to tune in, and to pay attention. There's a lot of dispiriting, discouraging stuff. Not just politically, but just in the world. And um, my my plea of people is to don't not to tune out, to continue to read, inform yourself, understand what's going on. And I'm talking about at the local and global level. Yeah, read local news, support local news, and beyond. And I think that from that point, from there, we can continue to find sources of progress, of purpose, of potential. But we need to keep feeding our own understanding right now. And so I would keep reading people. Yes, keep informed and seeing what's going on out in the world, the good and the not so good.